But I think starting us off, Kelley, you've got something about Christian nationalism, or what's going on there?
Yeah, it seems like these Christian nationalists are always in the news lately, and I'm kind of glad because it's kind of shedding a spotlight on them. But this is a story from Politico. It was written by Stella Rouse and Shilby Telahami. I'm hoping I didn't butcher that name. But it's about how a majority of Republicans support declaring the United States a Christian nation. And I think we all know that the Christian nationalist movement is a big part of the Republican Party at this point. But this article not only points that out, but it points out some of the people who are pushing this, like Marjorie Taylor Greene from Georgia and Governor Ron DeSantis from down in Florida. So there's a lot of things going on here. There's a majority of people really think we should be a Christian nation, which I really find surprising, since so many of them really believe in the Constitution too. And I've got a lot of things I'd like to say about this, but I'm going to throw it to Neil first and see what he has to say.
Throwing it to me. Oh, well, one of the things that I did like about the article, it talks about how the younger generations, the up and coming kids, even the Republican ones and conservative ones are almost, like I say, about half of them now are at least not in favor of this because they believe it to be, anti-constitutional or whatever. So that's promising. So hopefully these kids will have a much more influence in the future. And I personally highly doubt that your country will ever be a Christian nation. Like I'm sure at some point, at least when these kids get up there, and they're starting to climb that age ladder where they can actually make a difference. So I don't think it'll be too much of an issue for you guys. I don't think you really have to worry about it, but it is kind of scary what they talk about there.
Yeah, for sure. Scott, what are your thoughts?
Well, I was looking at the numbers, and there was something interesting about the results of this poll. They reported that 57% of Republicans that responded to the survey agree that it would be unconstitutional for the United States to become a Christian nation, which is disturbing on its own. I mean, that's like less than half of the Republicans want to, can recognize that, what is actually in the Constitution. And so, but when we add on top of that, the fact that 61% of Republicans favor the United States declaring itself a Christian nation, if we crunch those numbers together, we can see that at least 18% overlap in those groups. So there's at least 18% of the Republicans that responded to this survey both want the U.S. to be a Christian nation, and they also know that that would be unconstitutional. And, I just think, what the hell is wrong with these people? I thought this was supposed to be the party of patriots. And here they're saying we want this, even though we know it's against the Constitution. It's against the founding documents of our country. And it's, I don't know. It's frustrating. Neil was, sorry. SR, no, what do you think? What do you think?
No, I agree. I think that was one of the things that stuck out to me the most, was how many people were willing to say on one hand, like, oh yeah, we know this is a problem, like technically speaking, with, the whole government and how it's formed and all that stuff, but we still don't care, and we're comfortable with it. This decision. I was even surprised that there was about 51% of Republicans in the Gen Z category that also still supported this, and so that definitely is something I'm going to be paying attention to. I know for sure. I know we will here at this show. That's a lot to me. That's a lot more than I would have expected. But Kelley, I know you've got some other good thoughts on this. What was jumping out at you?
One of the things that really jumped out at me was that back in 2014, Pew Research did a poll and found that only 44% of Republicans went to church regularly. And now we got this such a large majority just 8 years later. Now, I realize it's 8 years later, but I can't see the amount of church-going Republicans rising up by 16 points in those 8 years. So there's like 16% of these people who think this should be a Christian nation, and yet they're not really practicing Christians. And that kind of scares me, because they're for things when they don't know what those things entail, right? So that, to me, that's a very scary thing. And I think we need to make sure we get out and vote against these people, because they really do want to take over the Republican Party. So, I mean, I'm not saying you should vote against Republicans. I think there's a lot of good Republicans and there's a lot of good Republican candidates, but we need to get rid of this part of the political structure, because it's a real danger to our society and to the freedom of religion that we have so valued in this country.
Yeah, for sure.
So I know Scott had some
Neil,
other
did
things
you have something real quick?
I'd
I
like
also
to talk about. What do you say, Scott?
Yeah.
Well, Neil mentioned earlier about the youth and how that's kind of encouraging that our younger up and coming voters are well, on the right side of history, I guess, or on the American side of history. And yes, yeah, I do find that to be encouraging. However, having the numbers at the voting booth only works when the system is working. And so I think we've seen much of the system breaking down. And it's no secret that psychological studies have repeatedly shown that generally more conservative or Republican minded people tend to lean more towards authoritarianism, things like purity, things like loyalty, and so on. And so, and what Kelley was saying, how they they don't know what the ramifications are, or they don't care, or they're not taking that into consideration. I can see this scenario happening where the voters just vote for what the candidates are saying. That's our candidate. Well, we're supposed to go along with that. But at the same time, the candidates are saying those things specifically because of the reaction that it gets from the voters. The article did say that, what was it, DeSantis in Florida? He was, quote, considering adding some of this rhetoric to his campaign. So that means it's not, it's not a core belief of his. It's obviously just a pandering to the voters. I don't know, Neil, go with that. What do you think?
Honestly, you know what I think it is? First of all, it says in the First Amendment that Congress can neither establish nor prohibit the practice of any religion. So these guys want to get into power so they can somehow keep other people from worshiping their religion. Like, what if it was like the American Muslim nation? Like, what if that happened? But I honestly believe it is a bunch of white Christian nationalist types that are losing their power, and they're screaming about it now, and they want to get everyone to say, well, let's turn the U.S. back into that Christian, which they never were, back into that Christian nation, as like our founding fathers wanted. These people need Andrew Seidel's book about the founding. That's all I can tell you.
Yeah, they do. Scott, do you have any other thoughts before Kelley wraps this up?
They're losing their power, man.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail right on the head there, Neil. But I think there was one thing that I saw this past Sunday. This was Rick Wilson. He's a Republican campaign strategist, and this was on MSNBC. And this is what he said. He said, first off, I need them to stop talking about the founders at this point. If you stretch back to the Mayflower, this is a country that was founded on fleeing from the religious persecution of an official state religion. And when the Constitution was being framed, we had states and we had leaders who all understood that this country was going to have a pluralistic approach to religion, which is to say the government would neither condone nor suppress any religion. This is a fundamental part of American history. And so it's nice to hear Republican voices speaking reason. And so my only hope is that the sober minds come out victorious here.
Yeah. Now, real quick, before Kelley wraps us up and we move on to some of the other cool stuff we have, Neil, is this something that you're experiencing up in Canada? Is this a wave that's traveling across the whole continent, or
no, not even close to what you guys have going on down there. We do have our conservative party up here.
Sure.
But I think we're a lot better at keeping religion and government separate up here. Even though I know that there are some screaming for it, but they're a very small number of people that are doing it.
That's good. That's good. That's
Mostly
looking
Alberta,
better than
too,
it is.
Alberta's our Texas.
Yeah. Well, Kelley, what give us your final thoughts on this, and we'll talk about some of the other articles we've got today.
Well, you were asking Neil, and the first thing I thought of was that crazy woman who thinks she's the Queen of Canada. So that was, see, he's got to deal with her. Right?
Oh, yeah.
But
yeah.
There, I was reading
nuttier than a
several
fruitcake,
polls that were done over the yeah, right. I was reading several polls done over the last year, and they pointed to the fact that the more a person embraces, going back to my original point, embraces the ideas of Christian nationalism, anti-mask, anti-vax, opposition to gun control, freedom over the safety of society, like no quarantining, that kind of thing, distrust of science, anti-immigrant, only for traditional gender roles, being for voter suppression. All of this stuff is the more you are a Christian nationalist, the more you believe in these things. And they found that the more you believed in these things, the less likely you were to go to church. And that there's a huge disconnect there. And I think we're overlooking it because somewhere there's some ground to make gains against these people somehow, I think, because they're practicing a Christianity that isn't the real Christianity. It's more like a feel-good Christianity. And I really think that maybe there's an open door that we can use to help fight back against this whole movement somewhere in that place. I'm not sure what it is yet, but I'm going to keep working on thinking about it.
Yeah.
That's about all
definitely.
I have.
And so. I know all of us here will be continuing to highlight these stories. And hopefully, in the near future, we'll be having some better news where this type of stuff is waning instead of growing. So